Back in the summer, when Kamala Harris was riding high in the polls, filling out stadiums, talking about joy, there was talk of Democrats flipping Republican leaning swing states like North Carolina that hadn't gone blue for almost 2 decades. But of course, that didn't happen. No, instead, North Carolina, like every other swing state, went for Trump, even saw their young voters shift to the right. And yet, despite what people might expect from a southern Trump voting state, Democrats in North Carolina actually did amazingly well at the state level, winning the races for governor, lieutenant governor, attorney general, and secretary of state, as well as winning enough seats to finally end the Republican supermajority in the state legislature. So, what happened in the Tar Heel state? And what lessons are there for Democrats nationally as they do their post-Harris post-mortem? Who better to unpack it all with than the state's own Democratic Party chair, Anderson Clayton, who was elected to that role last year at the age of just 25 and is currently the youngest state party chair in the country. Anderson, thanks so much for coming on Mehdi Unfiltered.
Thank you for having us.
So, let's just jump in with the most obvious question of all. What are Democrats in North Carolina doing to win votes at a state level that Democrats at the national, federal level are unable to do? How do you explain the disconnect?
I think we have to talk about the role of disinformation in this election cycle and the Republican apparatus and really the MAGA apparatus that we saw over the last 4 years, like spreading disinformation and misinformation about the Biden presidency, about Kamala Harris as a vice president. And I think that oftentimes folks forget about the way in which that nationalization of politics has really impacted the way that media covers races. And we don't have that necessarily in the state of North Carolina. We could very quickly, but I think that that's something where our state party has got to be able to go on the offense of over the next 4 and 6 years as we look to making sure that we're taking back a majority in our state legislature as well. The last time North Carolina went for a Democratic president was the last time that we had a Democratic majority in our state legislature. And I really think that those two things correlate very clearly, and we need to make sure that we're advocating for localized approaches to politics in our states.
So I'm curious to know, what do you say to critics outside of North Carolina who may label the voters there as, I don't know, weird, insane, ignorant? What kind of people vote for Democrats at a state level, but then vote for Donald Trump at a national level? How do you explain that disconnect to people who see how well you did in every statewide race, including the legislature, the governor, obviously, and then Trump?
I think it's the history in North Carolina. Democrats have a record of being very progressive when it comes to the state level in terms of public education. Democrats are the party that built the public education system in North Carolina and made us #1 for higher education in the state when it comes to a university system that includes over 16 public universities throughout the state that have each contributed to a geographical economic region and a driver, honestly, for these regions in our state as well. And so I think that a lot of times people at the local level have really associated the Democratic Party with an economic message. And we didn't shy away from that this year, but we also didn't shy away from an abortion message this year. Democrats in North Carolina, in my opinion, ran on, protecting personal freedoms, making sure that public education survived and was strong in our state. We also won Mo Green as our next superintendent in North Carolina, along with those other 4 statewide races as well that you talked about. And I think that it's really important for people to know that these public schools are the #1 economic driver in our rural communities right now. And the Democratic Party are the ones that have built that up. And that was really taking a local message and surfacing it. And I think that we could have done that across the country this year. When you look at states like Kentucky that also beat out private school voucher funding and taking away and defunding the #1 economic driver in every county in Kentucky as well. Like, there are states across the country that we could have utilized this messaging in more.
So I want to come back to the rural angle in a moment, but just on something you said a moment ago, you said you did a lot of strong economic messaging and abortion rights as well. A lot of the post-mortems since November the 5th have been about how, well, abortion rights were not enough to get Kamala Harris across the line. Democrats relied too much on the abortion message and not enough on the economic message. Back in 2023, you told Politico you were hoping to see North Carolina flip blue in the presidential race, which hasn't happened since '08. Do you blame the lack of flipping on that lack of a strong, maybe populist economic message?
I think that you have to take this not at the micro level, but at the macro level. What we saw in the United States was not what we saw across the country or across the world too. Like, there's a global there's a global message here as well with the fact that we're in a post-pandemic
Yeah.
economy and where people felt like that their pocketbooks were struggling. And at the end of the day, we were not talking enough about who to blame for that in terms of corporate consolidation, monopolies that we have right now in every single major industry that's taken away, even from places like North Carolina, where you look at the consolidation of agriculture. I mean, that in and of itself is something where our party could have talked more about, but I don't know that it could have defied this global red wave that we have seen so far. And I think that we just don't need to shy away from our values, which is the critique that I keep hearing from people of that we've got to backtrack our messaging. And I'm like, no, people just realized that they could vote for abortion rights and Donald Trump on the ballot this year. And that was something that should really take a inward of ourselves, is why people don't feel like that should have been associated with our party being pro-choice and pro-protecting abortion rights in every way, shape, and form. And
So you
I know that they're, oh, sorry.
so you don't buy the argument from some members of Congress in your party who say, "Well, we were too woke."
No, I don't. But I also represent a different generation than a lot of those folks do. And I reckon
You certainly do. But interestingly, you're saying a lot of interesting things outside of Democratic Party comfort zones. A few years ago, when you were leading Democrats in rural Roxborough County, you famously swapped the Democratic donkey branding for a Rural Matters slogan. I believe you also knocked on 600 doors to help flip the county's city council. What did you learn about rural voters from that time period do you think Democrats need to understand now? Do you think those voters are a lost cause?
no, I don't think anybody's a lost cause. I actually think after this election cycle, we should be looking at every single person as somebody worth talking to, which is what we said a lot in North Carolina as well this year, is that we wanted to reach out to every single voter, because I don't think that a political party defines how somebody is going to vote on the ballot. I think that they are looking for a person right now. And that's why it matters the type of candidates that we run. Mark Robinson gets a lot of credit right now for what we did in North Carolina. And I think that that's just, it's ridiculous to me, because he, people think independent.
This is the self-proclaimed black Nazi, just to contextualize him for our viewers, who ran as a Republican gubernatorial candidate.
Absolutely. And someone that a lot of people became very well known, or it became very well known to a lot of people through a CNN article that was that came out about him in porn shops, in case anyone is familiar with that. But I think that what people need to realize is that folks voted for a lot of the person this year, and whether or not they saw somebody that was willing to take charge and make change happen. And I think that's what we had from a lot of our down ballot Democrats, is people that saw folks that are change oriented candidates too.
Do you think Senator Bernie Sanders had a point when he said that Democrats have abandoned the working class, and so in return the working class, or at least the white working class, has abandoned the Democrats?
I think we've abandoned talking to every single voter. And I think that that's where, when we're looking at huge swaths of populations, North Carolina, I tell people this all the time. I'm like, 58% of our state still lives in a rural community. Like, I couldn't get away with just talking to an urban area, and nor do I want to, as you can probably tell that I'm coming to you from a rural part of the state right now. I think that it is important that we reach out and that we are looking at how do you have a statewide apparatus that actually engages every single region, because we have got people that would buy into and that would believe in a democratic message again, just if they heard one. But the lack of localized messaging and the lack of, local reporting, I tell people all the time, local journalism is dying in our rural communities, and has been, because of consolidation of the newspaper industry and other forms of media. And Democrats have got to get back into these areas and help tell the other side of a story, because right now people are only being fed one side. And I'm like, that's not true. And it's actually impacting you in a different way than it's impacting people in other communities. Like I said, public schools, like, it's the #1 economic driver in these rural communities. Everybody knows that their sister, their aunt, somebody in their family is related to or is married to a public school teacher. And we've got to make sure that people know that Democrats are the party that's fought for opportunity everywhere, and the equalizing of a playing field that includes making sure anybody, no matter where you come from, has the opportunity to get where you want to go.
In 2020, President Biden won young voters in your state by 16%. In this cycle, Harris's lead dropped to 4%, I believe, with Trump winning 47% of the youth vote. How worried are you about Republicans being able to continue cutting in to what was once a key Democratic Party demographic, the young voters? And is there any way for Democrats to bring back the enthusiasm that we saw from young people, especially in the Obama era?
I mean, we need to run young people. And that's something where, young folks right now are more likely to vote. They're 60% more likely to vote for a young person on the ballot, regardless of what political party that they're affiliated with. And I think that we have to look at young people as a voting bloc that wants to see themselves represented. And when you look at any marginalized demographic in political history, when the first sort of phase of the awakening in politics to me is representation, and then you move on to the other phase of looking at it and saying, okay, well, does the people that look like me actually represent what's best for my community? And that is a second phase that I don't think that young folks have fully gotten to yet. And that's why you see a lot of the framing of this election cycle around young people, I think.
And you yourself practice what you preach. You ousted the 73-year-old incumbent Bobby Richardson as chair of the North Carolina Democratic Party. And you seem to have brought about some very real changes at the state level since you did so. But what about the national level? You've got someone like Chuck Schumer, who's in his 70s, Senate Majority Leader, just lost the Senate. Should people like that be encouraged to step aside for a new generation of leadership at the national level too?
I think that everyone should question, why am I still here? And I think that
Well
you
said.
have the ability. I think if you have the ability to say and give an answer to that, then great. But it's what I would tell anybody right now that looks at me and says, I want to run for office. And I'm like, great. What do you want to change? What do you want to do? Why do you want to do that? And there should be an answer that goes along with it. It shouldn't just be, oh, I want it. And I think that a lot of our party has to look internally at, why are you still in these positions? And can you help somebody? And a lot of the people that have helped me in this role, right? The institutional knowledge is something that we need as young people in roles like this. But I just wish that there was an opportunity to look at it and say, and question why. We should all be doing that consistently, I think.
And just on the youth vote, before we move forward, a few days after the election, you tweeted that, quote, I genuinely believe young people need to stick together in our party. I know the split that we find ourselves in right now will not serve us. It will only serve the right. What split were you referring to? And what do you make of people who say that young voters were split on Gaza in particular?
I think that young people need to understand that we've got enough people in our party that want to attack us and blame us for an election, and that we are stronger together. There's a saying about coalitions that it's not always people that you like that are in them, but you recognize that you're not going to get anywhere without each other. And I think that young people, regardless of sort of what side, part or not partisan, but just like policy wise that you feel like you're in this party right now, we recognize that it's better when more people are involved in it and when more people are being questioned in it. And I think that we've got to be able to do that. And I don't think that we should be criticizing young people, each other, for how we feel and or how we're engaging in political organizing right now. I think that everybody's got a lane to play and we should always be uplifting each other.
Do you think did you see the impact of Gaza on the ground in a place like North Carolina with young voters?
Absolutely. I think that you saw it from UNC's perspective. UNC Chapel Hill had one of our largest campus protests. But I also think that I heard a lot of those students still say, we're voting for down ballot Democrats. We understand the political power in voting. And I even think that we should have been, the uncommitted movement was something that I actually I think it was them using political power in the right way, because it's something where it's not discouraging people from the political process. It's saying, no, let's use it to have our voices heard. And that's something where Democrats should be taking it and embracing it and saying, like, that is something that we want to see more of in our party, is the ability to come to the table rather than run away from it. Because right now people do not want to build up the Democratic Party. It seems like people are more interested in going around it. And I'm like, that is not how our system is going to work right now, at least in the most effective way for us to gain political power. And that's what I care about as a young person.
So given all that and given what you just said, are you considering throwing your hat into the ring for the Democratic National Committee chair?
No, I do not think that I have the experience to do that yet. I think that North Carolina needs somebody to have sustainable vision and be able to win another Supreme Court seat in 26. We're going through a recount right now in our Supreme Court race for Justice Allison Riggs to keep her seat on the bench. It was won by 722 votes across our state. We were able to run a Chase and Cure program that helped cure over 1,800 ballots in the state. And that was through working with strong partner organizations and making sure that people's voices got to actually count this year. And I think I have a lot of work left to do in this state, to be honest.
So who are you supporting for the DNC role? What kind of person do you think should be running the DNC? What kind of vision? What kind of politics?
I'll be honest, this sounds bad after everything I just said to you, probably, but I could be bought in the way of I think that somebody needs to come in and say state party chairs should be paid. State parties and the infrastructure of our party should be worth more than less than 7% of the DNC's annual budget, which is what it is now. 25% is what I would take. I could be negotiated down to 15, though.
Okay.
But I think that somebody needs to seriously look at where they could put their money because the DNC is a fundraising vehicle and we need to be, people talked about it a lot this year. We raised a lot of money. And, it wasn't the money that was the problem. It was how it was spent. And I think that we need to reevaluate why down ballot Democrats lost in some of our races that could have been winnable because of where funding went this year. And a lot of the bang for our buck that we could get are in states like North Carolina, in states like the South right now. We have 55% of Black voters and Black people in at this moment in time, but folks are not considering us as a place where you can gain political power right now.
Last question. Last week, North Carolina's GOP-controlled legislature passed a bill designed to strip the new incoming Democratic governor and the new attorney general, also Democratic, of crucial powers, including appointing the state election board, filling court vacancies, and challenging laws passed by the legislature. If that bill succeeds, how bad is that going to be for Democrats in North Carolina? How much will democracy be undermined in North Carolina? What plan or ability do you have to fight back?
When you have an attorney general that doesn't have the ability to sue against unconstitutional laws or things that they find to be unconstitutional, I think we're in grave danger. And Senate Bill 382 is what it is right now. That's going through our legislature. It just passed our House and our Senate, and it is on Governor Cooper's desk right now to be vetoed. And we are going to see if we can have the 3 Republicans that voted against the bill, 3 Western Democrats or Western North Carolina Republicans that voted against the bill in the legislature originally to uphold Cooper's veto on this bill right now, because it was supposed to guarantee millions, over $221 million to go towards Hurricane Helene relief. That is what this bill was originated and intended for. And Republicans have taken it and politicized it in order to being a 131-page bill where only 12 of it actually addresses hurricane relief. The rest of it, to your point, addresses taking away powers from Democratic elected officials incoming that voters voted to give them that power. And this is an extreme disenfranchisement of their power. So we plan to do everything we can in court and otherwise to be able to take on and protect these powers. But we also know what we're up against right now in our court system and what we're fighting back against. And Republicans are nervous about losing their supermajority come January. That's what we know from this.
I think that's an understatement. They're so keen to shore up their supermajority, they're willing to throw victims of a hurricane under the bus. Anderson Clayton, thank you so much for your time. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Did you like this video? Don't forget to subscribe to this YouTube channel and turn on notifications. For exclusive content and to support our independent, unfiltered journalism, head over to Zateo.com. Your support matters.